Okay, I am starting with this thrift find that you see here, and it's just a little glass pin dish and with gold rim. And someone picked it up on their travels, and this is in Copenhagen. And this is The Little Mermaid, a story by Hans Christian Andersen. And it was commissioned by the son of the founder of Carlsberg beer. And it's the story of a mermaid who falls in love with a prince and longs for him and tries to gain a human soul. And so my question is there anyone that, looking back on your lifetimes, is there anyone you ever loved and longed for? And maybe you've kept their letters. And someone might say, you're still carrying a torch. Well, this presentation is about carrying a torch, and it's about letters and love and longing and loss and swimming. And this is a story that originates in Greek mythology. And then Ovid chose to tell the story in a series of imagined letters between characters in mythology. And this is the story of Hero and Leander. And Hero was a priestess of Aphrodite, and Leander was a young man. So I'm going to dive right in. And this is where the story takes place. This is part of present day Turkey. And Turkey is a transcontinental country. Part of it is on the continent of Europe, and part of it is on the continent of Asia. And it was Greek mariners in the 6th century BCE who were the first to name and map land and sea navigational routes, and the first to name those two continents. So, while I tell you this story of Hero and Leander, I'd like you to see the story in your mind's eye and think about the choices that you would make if I asked you to paint this story. And then I'm going to show you the choices that various artists made. And some of those artists would return to this story more than once. Okay. So here we go. Hero is a priestess of Aphrodite, and she lives in a tower on Sestos, on the European side of the Hellespont, also known as the Dardanelles. And she's taken a vow of chastity. Okay. Leander is a young man, and he lives on Abydos, on the other side of this body of water. And they meet at a festival honoring Aphrodite, this goddess of love, and they fall in love. But his parents don't like her. And she's taken this vow of chastity in her devotion to Aphrodite. But he sees no logic in that and convinces her to stop refusing. And so every night, all summer long, he would swim from Abydos to Sestos, and she would be in her tower with a lit beacon to guide him through the night. And they would meet every night. And as the season changed and it became more into colder weather, it got stormy. And he would write to her and say, I tried to get to you. I went 3 times, but the waves pushed me back. And then her letter back to him would say, oh, You must get to me. I'll die without you." And so one night, on a stormy night, he sets out to see her. But the storm blows her torch out, and he loses his way, and he drowns. And when she sees his body in the morning, she throws herself from her tower and dies. So that's the story. And now I will show you how it was represented, starting at the Getty. This is on view in the North Pavilion, this platter, the one that's all the way on the right. And it's big enough to hold a roast chicken, I would say. And this is the back of it. And this is the front. And what I read was that the artist wanted to paint Leander 3 times on land, swimming, and then drowned. But the artist miscalculated his composition and had to widen the patch and paint over the bottom part of the tower. So I'll come in closer and you see Leander represented 3 times. And you'll see Eros a lot because, after all, she is a priestess of Aphrodite, and she's holding the burned out torch. This is a coin from about 238 CE. That is a Greek coin minted under Roman rule, and it recently sold at an auction in Germany for $27,000. This is in Vienna, and you see Eros is crying, Leander is dead, being taken care of by some naiads, and on the right, Hero is plunging to her death. And in the same museum is this representation of Hero lamenting dead Leander. This is a set of tapestries in England, and here's Leander's parents saying, "Stay away from that girl." But love is love, and he couldn't stay away. And here he is arriving at her tower. And Ovid speaks about her having a nurse. And I just love that foot in the air. And the death of Leander. And Eros with the blown out torch. This artist, William Etty, would paint this story more than once. And we have the parting after a night of secret meeting. And there he's taking off at dawn. And 2 years after the artist painted this, in the same gallery is this painting. And he said of this painting, the artist, "I consider this the finest of my fine paintings." And the title is Hero, having thrown herself from the tower at the sight of Leander drowned, dies on his body. This is by Turner, known as a painter of light. And look at that turbulent sky. What Turner did, what I read, was that he totally breaks with convention. And the doomed couple is hard to spot. They're down by the shoreline. Eros is holding a torch and a lantern. And over on the right are the spirits ready to welcome them both. And I'll come in closer. Another embrace. And see the waves at their feet and the torch. up above. This artist would paint this more than once. This is one rendition. But Hero's lighting this beacon on the ground because you see those flowers, those little 3 flowers, and another by the same artist. This is gouache on paper on panel, and gouache is a mixture of watercolor and white pigment. And that red thread that you see, that loose red thread, is symbolic of the thread of life or time, apparently, from what I read. My guy, Sir Frederick Leighton, preparatory drawing. He chose to paint this in 2 paintings, one above the other, calling this The Last Watch. And this is the top of the painting. And the bottom, the death of Leander, with the sea crashing around this single rock. And together, it looks like this. And that lower painting is called a predella. Okay, so this is Christopher Marlowe, and he was a playwright and a poet. He lived at the same time as Shakespeare, and he had started his own telling of the Hero and Leander story. But he didn't get that far into it. They hadn't even gotten to their deaths or anything, because he himself was stabbed to death when he was 29 years old in a case of murder that is still to this day mysterious. A man named George Chapman would finish his version of Hero and Leander, and Shakespeare would reference the Hero and Leander story a few times in his various plays. But the only time that Shakespeare ever quoted another author was when he quoted this man, Christopher Marlowe, in his Hero and Leander story by saying this line, "Whoever loved that loved not at first sight." And that was in As You Like It, and said by a character named Phoebe, who is in love with Rosalind, who's disguised as a man. And his version was a little different. He brought Neptune into the story, and in his story, Neptune confuses the swimming Leander for Ganymede and takes him down to the bottom of the sea before realizing his error. And there are 2 illustrations at the Getty Center, and this one has Neptune in it. I'll come in a little closer. And the same artist would do this illustration, and you can see the torch on the ground. Okay, this is Lord Byron, and he was one of the leading figures of the Romantic movement. And he was born with a club foot. And despite that, he was still a good athlete and a great swimmer. And when he was 22 years old, he would swim from Sestos to Abydos with another swimmer and a boat, a man in a boat, because there are surface currents and cross currents and undercurrents, and it's a tough swim. But he did it. He did get sick from it, got a terrible cold, but he would write a poem about it, and this is it. If in the month of dark December, Leander, who was nightly wont, what maid will not the tale remember? to cross thy stream, broad Hellespont. If when the wintry tempest roared, he sped to Hero, nothing loth, and thus of old thy current poured, fair Venus, how I pity both. For me, degenerate modern wretch, though in the genial month of May, my dripping limbs I faintly stretch, and think I've done a feat today. But since he crossed the rapid tide, according to the doubtful story, to woo, and Lord knows what beside, and swam for love as I for glory. 'Twere hard to say who fared the best. Sad mortals, thus the gods still plague you. He lost his labor, I my jest, for he was drowned, and I've the ague. Um, this man would also write The Curse of Minerva, slamming Lord Elgin, who was removing marbles from 1801 to 1811, removing marbles off the Acropolis. And the Greeks loved this man, and he would join the War of Independence, fighting the Ottoman Empire. And at the age of 36, he would die of a fever. And this is him on his deathbed. And you see his foot is covered, and his poems are encircled beneath him. Okay, this is Cy Twombly, and he was named after his father, and his father had the same name, and his nickname was Cy, and the father's nickname was Cy because he was a major league pitcher, and they called him Cy after Cy Young, another major league pitcher. So just a fun fact. And he would paint this twice, once in a four-part series and then a standalone. So I'm going to show you the four-part series first. This is part one of the four-part series. Two, three, and four. And if you can't read it, it says, he's gone, up bubbles all his amorous breath. Okay, so now I'll show you the one standalone, but the standalone is called Hero and Leander to Christopher Marlowe. And do remember how Christopher Marlowe died. Okay, I have to get back to the torch. There is a Roman goddess of war who's associated with carrying a torch, and her name is Bellona, which comes from the Latin word for war, where we get other words like belligerent and bellicose and antebellum, before the war. And her parents were Jupiter and Juno, and she's the twin sister or wife of Mars, who's the father of Romulus and Remus. And she's known for destruction, devastation, conquest, bloodlust. Her attributes include a plumed helmet, sword, spear, or flail, sometimes carrying a torch. And here she is with Janus, who's a god of gates and doorways and beginnings and endings. And both are associated with Roman ceremonies of declaring war. And she would sometimes be shown with Romulus and Remus because of her connection to Mars. And I tell you all this and show you all this because we have an object in the Getty Center, and I think she's been misnamed. And this is Minerva, and she's in the South Pavilion. She's there still. I checked. And it says that she's protecting painting, sculpture, music, justice, and medicine, the attributes which lie at her feet. But I think this is Bellona because she's got a plumed helmet. She's carrying a torch. And if you wondered what a flail looked like, She's got a flail in her right hand. So you might say, well, Gina, did you check the provenance? Yes, I did. And here's what I found. Okay, it probably belonged to this Frenchman that you see here. He died in 1785. This was purchased in 1786. Makes sense. But look at the next two lines. What does it say at the end? It says entitled as Bologna. So even though it says it's Minerva, I think it's probably Bologna. But I got to tell you about this guy. He was a French army officer, a diplomat, a statesman. He wrote the Second Treaty of Versailles. He was a huge art collector. He owned 8 Rembrandt paintings. But how he gained favor in the court was because he was friends with Madame de Pompadour. And she was the king's favorite mistress, because you have to have a favorite. So she was the chief mistress, but she must have known jealousy because this man rose to prominence after he procured for Madame de Pompadour letters that the king, Louis XV, had written to his cousin's wife. So those papers that this man is holding in this painting, it could be the Second Treaty of Versailles, or it could be the letters that the king wrote to his cousin's wife. And this is Madame de Pompadour. She was about 25 years old here. She was married at 20. She had a husband, gave birth to a couple of children, but she knew the king was going to be hunting nearby, and she sort of placed herself in the woods so he would come upon her. And then he invited her to a masked ball. And when she was presented, the court commissioned this painting of Diana, of her as Diana the Huntress. Even the queen liked her. She was known for her wit and her charm. She had an apartment right above the king and queen, so that was convenient. And she would become one of the most influential arts patrons and tastemakers of the court of King Louis XV. And she would commission portraits of herself. And here she's about 35 years old. And she's already retired from her major mistressing duty. She retired from that aspect of it when she was about 29. So she's retired, but she had a lasting friendship with the king. And I just want you to look at her writing table because letters are so important. And take a quick look of this writing table because in the Getty collection, we have something very similar. And it's this. And this is a French writing desk that Mr. Getty purchased. And it was one of the first pieces of furniture he purchased. And it's by Bernard van Riesenberg. And this painting was done in 1756. This piece of furniture is from 1755. And what had happened was in 1936, Getty had leased a fully furnished penthouse apartment in New York City, and it was filled with tapestries and decorative arts and commodes and writing desks. And it really had an effect on him. And I'm so grateful because it's 90 years later, and here we are. This is where it is in the South Pavilion, this particular writing desk, one of many pieces he bought from this Rococo period. And he was quoted, this is the ranch house in 1954. And he was quoted as saying, "It wasn't that a spark was struck, but rather a blazing torch was applied, and my collective urge flared high." And she's about 37 years old here, and I could really see her as an influencer today. The king's profile is on her wrist, on her bracelet. But she could talk me into buying that blush. And this was completed after she died. She was 42 when she passed away, and she would die at Versailles. She had a number of health issues. But uh, all these years later, this lady still has an influence because as recently as February of this year, the Getty bought something that belonged to her. And it was this. And this is a porcelain Chinese cat. And the gilt bronze stool is French. And this is in the South Pavilion in Gallery 109. Okay, I got to talk about this torch. This is a diagram of the dimensions of the Statue of Liberty, known as Liberty Enlightening the World. And this was a gift to celebrate the centennial of American independence and the abolition of slavery. And here it is under construction in Paris. It is made of cast iron and stainless steel. It is copper clad, the thickness of 2 pennies together. And there are 350 pieces. And what had happened was the statue was going to be a gift to our country, but it was up to us to raise the funds to build the base and the pedestal. And it really wasn't happening over on our end. And someone in France said, "Send him the torch." And so years before we had the whole statue, the hand and the torch came. And this is in Philadelphia on a centennial exhibition in 1876. And you see people up by the flame. And this is a stereoscopic image in Philadelphia. And then the torch would come to New York, where it was in Madison Square Park for 6 years. And the head and shoulders was in Paris at the Paris World's Fair in 1878. And the points on her crown stand for the 7 continents and the 7 seas. And just another part. And the base funding would finally happen uh, with the help of Joseph Pulitzer, uh, helped with fundraising, and people sent in money. And the pedestal is about 154 feet tall, a bit taller than the statue itself. And this was the unveiling in 1886. And she is in a contrapposto pose, and you see the broken shackles of slavery at her feet. And when I was in 6th grade at PS 98 in Douglaston, Queens, I went with my class on a field trip, and we took a bus to the city, and we took a ferry, and I climbed the spiral stairs up to her crown. And you never forget your field trips. The torch here is clad 24 karat gold clad over copper. And this is a photographer sample from the 1970s that I found at my parents' house. And that tear you see is hand retouched. And there's a poem written by a woman named Emma Lazarus called The New Colossus, and it's inside on a plaque. And I will read it. not like the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land. Here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name, Mother of Exiles. From her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome. Her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor that twin cities frame. Keep, ancient lands, your storied pomp, cries she, with silent lips. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. And this is Muhammad Ali lighting the cauldron to start the 1996 Olympics in Atlanta. And he had won in 1960 the gold medal. And this tradition, a few months before, a flame is lit in Olympia. And from there, it is carried for a number of weeks until it reaches the host city, spreading a message of peace and hope and friendship. But there's another athletic event, and it's coming up in a few weeks on August 30th, and it happens every year. And it's a swim from Sestos to Abydos, from Europe to Asia. And it commemorates Victory Day of a battle between the Turks and the Greeks in 1922. So it's a symbol of Turkish independence and freedom. And for a few hours, this very busy shipping lane is closed, and people swim from one continent to the other. And here's a time board and a quote I love: "The water doesn't know how old you are." And that's it.
Yahoo!
Fantastic.
How far is it to swim? Is it miles?
It's kind of like as the crow flies, it's like a mile, but because of the currents and everything,
Right.
it seems like more.
Yeah.
So, oh, you can stop
Wow.
you can stop the recording.